you have been a great relief to me. You know, you have helped me in so many ways. First, I fell off my horse, thought I was crippled and would never walk again. And then the Seminary for Learning burns down and moves to Baton Rouge. It was more than I could bear, but you, with your youthful enthusiasm, have shown me that things are not so bad after all.
Father, it is always an honor to assist you in any way that I might be able to do.
I am still having a hard time with David Boyd moving the Seminary for Learning down to Baton Rouge, but he did find temporary headquarters at the School for the Deaf and the Blind. But you have also shown me that being down to Baton Rouge, he's closer to the legislature and the money, and that's more important than being close to me.
I did not mean, Father, to belittle your importance to the survival of the school.
That's not what I meant at all, young man. You know, David Boyd was a colonel in the Louisiana Fighting Tiger Rifles. I have all the confidence in the world in him. And he's also accepted your idea to change the name to Louisiana State University. I am now more determined to go to Washington and talk to General Sherman about the donation of federal lands for the new university. I was thinking about the federal arsenal, the Pentagon barracks.
If you are thinking of going to Washington using that cane, sir, I must say I've gotten my optimism from you. I regularly wonder at your optimism during these times.
Oh, if you think things are hard now, son, anything is better than the war and the occupation. I mean, we did not know what to expect. I was fortunate enough to send you and Amy and Fergus to your aunts in Virginia. But I am most regretful that I was absorbed in your brother Donald's death so much that I neglected you in '66.
Good heavens, Father. You need not apologize for anything during that time.
I am so grateful that you were with me when he was sick in New Orleans and with me the night that he died. I don't know if I've ever shown you how much of a comfort you were to have you with me when we brought his body home for burial before you returned to the University of Virginia for your studies.
You know, Father, we have talked little about what has happened to Tyrone during the war. What is it that did happen?
Well, it's kind of hard to say, but the Navy got here around March the 16th, around St. Patrick's Day. The Union Navy got here, and that was General Porter, or Admiral Porter and Admiral Farragut. And then, well, we didn't get the news right away because we were out here without any writing stock. General Taylor had retreated just a couple of weeks before towards Shreveport, and the city of Alexandria surrendered without any opposition.
Why no opposition?
Well, think about it, son. What are 600 old men, women, and children going to do against an armada of 90 Union vessels and 10,000 Union troops?
Couldn't Taylor have left some protection?
Well, Taylor did send Vincent's cavalry down here. They were camped out at Henderson Hill, about 10 miles up the road. Now, it was a skirmish on March 21st. We couldn't hear it being 10 miles away, but it was a cold night, and it was stormy weather, and I have a feeling the Confederates couldn't hear the Union surrounding them either. You know, Vincent escaped, but 250 men and their cavalry, their horses, were taken by the Union.
I had no idea that Vincent lost that cavalry. That must have hindered reconnaissance.
Oh, I'm sure losing that cavalry was a bigger blow to Taylor than all those ships were to Banks. You know, Porter had brought the ships here to protect Banks on his incursion toward Shreveport. But they got stuck. The Red River was low, and they couldn't get past the rapids. They couldn't get past the falls. It was a disaster. Now, so what Banks did is he was going to lead 10,000 men here to protect the ships and march on to Shreveport. But if General Sherman had been here, my goodness, he would have told Porter to go home, and he wouldn't have, he would have just marched to Shreveport.
Well, what about the Union generals? Do you know them?
I did know most of them, except for Admirals Farragut and Smith. But I did know pretty much everybody in Mexico that was in the Union forces. Now, I didn't meet the Navy in Mexico, but I had heard of the porters. They were a long line of sailing men who had served their country.
Well, I'm glad Mother was not alive to see the war and the Red River Campaign.
Yeah, that was a sad campaign. It was a disaster for the Union. I remember, let me go back a second and say that we did not know what the occupation was going to be like. It happened so early. New Orleans was captured so early in the war. I think the occupation began in '62. You know, that was a sad part about it. And then all of the Union soldiers marching towards Shreveport, I don't know how it happened, but Banks all of a sudden went inland towards Mansfield. Now, I think that Taylor must have had a spy out there on the river to tell Banks to go inland, but that was a disaster for him.
You know what we talk about at the university is Butler the Beast.
Oh, I've got to tell you about Butler the Beast. Major General Benjamin the Beast Butler of Massachusetts. It was early in New Orleans. The Beast was about how the Union treated our Southern ladies. Now, our daughters did not want anything to do with the Union troops because they were killing their brothers and their fathers. So they had a trick. They would pour their chamber pots out of second-story windows on top of the Union soldiers. Oh, the greatest victim was Admiral Farragut himself, the man who forced the surrender of New Orleans.
Well, tell me, we at the university have never heard of any good reason for why the Red River Campaign took place.
Well, I'll let Mr. Banks explain that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Major General Nathaniel Princess Banks, Union Commander of the Department of the Gulf, and charged with the operation of the Red River Campaign. First of all, young man, if you would help me with this easel, let's get that situated here so everyone can see. Kindly. And again, if you would follow me with this pointer if you can as I speak. I'm here to present to you, ladies and gentlemen, an overview of the plan and objectives of the campaign. I have here in this easel a writing. You may follow along as I speak, or you may simply listen to me as I will add further explanation. And I'm sure my explanation will be such that no one will have any questions. So, the objectives. Number one, destroy Taylor's army. This man has been like a gadfly, first here, then there, never knowing where he will be next. like the blasted Louisiana mosquitoes. The campaign, one of its goals was to put an end to that. Objective number 2, capture Shreveport, control the Red River, and stop any further incursions from East Texas. The capital of the Confederacy was moved to Shreveport, where there was substantial industry and arms production, which was constantly being augmented by troops and supplies coming in from East Texas. Objective 3, confiscate cotton from plantations along the Red River. The northern textile industries, they've been suffering from lack of cotton, which has been declared a war prize and can bring a tidy sum to the confiscating military unit. My men, of course, will be doing that for the good of the people. Objective 4, organize a pro-union government in the occupied territories. I can tell you now there are 25,000 French troops in Mexico sent there by Napoleon III. The French and the Confederacy want to trade recognition of each other so they can legitimize their armed takeovers. Let me tell you, we cannot allow a hostile foreign power so close to our borders. Who knows? They could flood our country with their population and even open a gateway to the rest of South America. Now, the voting for this convention has already occurred throughout Louisiana, and the establishment of the pro-union government will be freely determined at that convention. Now, the union strategy to achieve these objectives consists of 4 parts, and it's shown on this map here. And then if you will help me again. Thank you. All right, first of all, with Colonel A.J. Smith in Jackson, Mississippi, next to Vicksburg. Now, at this time in the war, Vicksburg has fallen. Sherman and Grant are there at Vicksburg waiting with troops for a campaign to strike against Mobile. Smith will borrow 10,000 troops from Sherman, proceed down the Mississippi, then up the Red River to be in Alexandria on March 17th. Second, Admiral Porter, who assisted in the siege on Vicksburg, is also waiting there. Smith will be assisted in transporting his troops by Admiral Porter, who has 20 gunboats and enough supply and transport ships to protect these troops all the way to Shreveport. Third, I, Nathaniel Banks, will proceed out of New Orleans up the Teche with 20,000 men and rendezvous with Smith in Alexandria. And fourth, we have General Steele in Arkansas with 7,000 men. He will join with me below Shreveport and then help maintain the occupation of that city. On the face of it, seems quite a straightforward, simple plan. People have asked me, who devised this plan? Well, let me tell you. It was not me. No matter what you read or write in the future history books, it was not me. This plan was determined by Chief General of the Army, Henry Halleck. I can assure you there's correspondence in the National Archives that will prove that Halleck wrote to me to tell me of the plan, and I wrote back to him to try to talk him out of it. I had already made an adequate incursion into Texas, and we did not need to do that again. You will further read in a subsequent correspondence to me that Halleck claimed that Sherman and Steele agreed with him that Shreveport was the best place for a base of operations to protect both Arkansas and Louisiana. His letters also show, after his campaign failed, that Halleck wrote to whoever would accept his letters to try to convince them that the whole thing was my idea. That is not true. The plan was a disaster from the start, and I was simply the fall guy, as you people put it today. It was not my plan. Halleck dreamed it up when he thought Sherman would lead the campaign. See, Sherman had been to North Louisiana before. He knew the terrain, he knew the people. But General Grant decided he needed Sherman for the attack on Mobile. So unfortunately, the plan fell to me. How could I disobey a superior? Simply put, I could not. And I I had such a splendid reputation at the time. You see, I was the first of what was called the political generals, the grant that President Lincoln appointed over West Point graduates. Before this, I had absolutely no military experience, and my first rank was brigadier general. Instead, I was a legislator and then governor of Massachusetts. Now, this may seem strange to you, but Lincoln understood that I could get things done, that I knew the money it took to move large groups of men, and I had the skill in politics to move small groups of men. I could administer programs and solve problems, and I could get people to do my will. Lincoln understood that those qualities were needed every bit as much as military experience. Did you know that I introduced into New Orleans sanitation measures that would prevent people from just pouring their chamber pot contents into the streets? Now, that seems funny, but that measure alone reduced the death toll from yellow fever from 5,000 to 2 in just 1 year. But I am sure you have not heard of that accomplishment, not after the campaign failed. I knew when that happened, I would not be remembered for my best qualities. Instead, those people you call historians say I was persuaded to the plan by my supporters in the textile industry. That I thought the enemy was too weak and unwilling to fight. That I retreated too soon. That I could have overwhelmed Taylor and taken Shreveport if only I had roused my men and moved forward instead of backward toward Pleasant Hill and the river. If only I had followed my own plan. They even quote Grant as saying the Red River Campaign was nothing but one blunder after another. So, forever after, I've been known as what? Can you guess? Blunderbanks. Blunderbanks. But let me tell you, those historians were not there. Those men who look into the past and think they know why or who should be called a hero. Have any of those historians come forward to say it was Banks who controlled yellow fever? That it was Banks who recruited the 1st Regiment of Free Men of Color to fight for the Union? I organized the Corps d'Afrique. In fact, I even appointed free men of color as their officers. And these men fought with me at Port Hudson in 1863, and again in the Red River Campaign in 1864. So why do these historians give credit to a white commanding officer as the first to lead U.S. colored troops into battle? And why do they say this first battle took place at Petersburg, Virginia? I'll tell you why. These historians let what you call a movie called Glory do their work for them. What a joke. History by movie. I generally agree with a man you know as Henry Ford, who said, history is more or less bunk. What I don't agree with, and I can't understand, is how they continue to hold that, to call a hero of that damn Richard Taylor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am that damn Richard Taylor. Now, I must admit that I sympathize with old Blunderbanks. History has often reported that I was well read in military history, rather than simply saying that I had very little military experience, precious little more than Banks did himself. Banks and I were both what you call political generals. He and I had precious little military training of our own. History was always quick to point out that though I served in the Mexican-American War as the secretary to General Zachary Taylor, he was later the President of the United States and my father. And history was also quick to point out every time I was promoted that Jefferson Davis was my brother-in-law. So, with all those being said, who from the North or the South would say anything unkind about me? But I do believe that Blunder's real problem with my being a hero, my being considered a hero, came from his inability to understand people's need for heroes. After the war, the North had no more need for heroes. They had all they needed. They had no need for more heroes, nor the need to re-examine various views, various points of history, various examinations of history, to decide that Banks was a hero himself. The North needed no more heroes, particularly after Lincoln's tragic death made him the ultimate hero. So there was no room for Blunder Banks in the North's lineup of heroes. And how could the South accept those Yankees as heroes? Those vile Yankees that needlessly pillaged and destroyed Southern homes and, no matter how justified, killed Southerners' loved ones. No, the South, Southerners, and Southern historians, past and present, have always needed heroes they could call their own. And the North and Northern historians have always hitched along, accepted the Southern revision of history, because people have always loved underdogs, and people always need heroes. So, Blunder Banks was pleasant and reasonably competent, but history wants more of its heroes than pleasant. They want juicy more than ordinary, and if not beautiful, at least pitiable. Actually, I was able to give both of those. In fact, I was the perfect Southern gentleman, not like my father. He was a man of the West, a war hero, and the President of the United States. So his manners didn't matter. I, on the other hand, was the perfect Southern gentleman, as I said. I was educated in Europe and at Harvard and Yale. I had plantations. I built beautiful mansions. I served in the United States Senate, and I entertained in the finest fashion. So when it came to war, what could I be but a gentleman hero? Now, you and I will never really know if I had any genuine ability. History's not much concerned with that question, because I proved before the war that I was beautiful, and the war made me pitiable. I had tragedies in life. My sons, for example. Every man wants a son. Every man desires a son. My father, for example, had 6 daughters before as he put it, the Lord blessed him with a son. Myself being that son, I began life as a crown prince. And along the same lines, I had 3 daughters before my 2 sons came along. And oh, I was proud. I was proud of them. Which may be why the Lord decided I shouldn't have them long. There was a fever, and within 30 days, April 27th to May 28th, 1863, they were both gone. At ages 4 and 6, both of them gone. My wife never recovered, and I don't believe I did either. I was angry for the rest of my life. Angry at the Army command, angry at the loss of the war and so many loved ones. Angry at the humiliation of Reconstruction. And beyond all that, I suffered all my life from what you now know as rheumatoid arthritis. My hands and feet were badly disfigured even at an early age, and I was often completely incapacitated. So you'll see very few pictures of me. You'll find very few pictures of me in the books. I had both a beautiful life and pitiable tragedies. After the war, I had nothing. No family life, no land, no money, no health. But history sees me as a hero, the successful officer of the battles of Mansfield and Pleasant Hill, the one who drove Blunder Banks from Louisiana. So I'm proof, I guess, that there are 2 sides to every story. Blunder Banks envied my status as a hero, but I wonder whether he or you would trade places with me.
Good evening. My name is Wellington Whittenbury. Now that name means nothing to any of you, but it should. Before you stands the man solely responsible for the federal defeat in Louisiana back in '64. Now, if you think I'm stretching the blanket a mite, just listen on. I'm the man who convinced Mr. Banks to abandon the fleet on the Red and travel inland to Mansfield. I'm a riverboat pilot. And I worked for the Federal Navy out in New Orleans for 2 years before I got a summons to come up from Port Hudson to meet up with this Admiral Porter fellow up at the mouth of the Red where he had a fleet foreman. I am told, says he, you are an experienced riverboat pilot familiar with the Red. Was I told correctly? You was, says me. Good. I have a fleet of some 90 vessels. Can you pilot me as far north as Shreveport? Well, that might depend. Depend on what, sir? You got a mite frothy there. Would depend on the draft of your largest vessel. The Red is a narrow, winding, snag-filled river. The year has been dry, and the river is running low. The Eastport says he draws 6 feet 3 inches, and I can sail my ships on damp sand. Can you get me to Shreveport? Well, I reckon I can, says me. And where do we meet up with this General Banks? Alexandria, says he, and this stays within these walls, but I fear that General Banks is a disaster waiting to happen. So we're up at the mouth of the Red. I'm standing on the bridge of the Eastport, and a mighty ship was she. Admiral says to me, I recommend you let the smaller vessels in first. The Eastport runs aground, she'll block the river. I need overwhelming firepower, says the Admiral. I need the Eastport in the lead. Seems the Admiral was seeing ironclad monsters behind every bend in the river, and the Eastport was his ironclad killer. Turns out the Admiral was afraid of the boogeyman.